Welcome back to OpenLine tonight. Thank you for being with us. We're talking with the folks from the Tennessee Equality Project, specifically Jace Wilder, the education manager, talking about issues surrounding and leading up to the midterm elections and also our legislative session here in Tennessee next year. But first, we want to get to our phone calls. We always like to prioritize those. We have Tyler on the line. Tyler, thank you for being with us.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I had a question. Yes, I had a question for Jace. So with Tennessee being dominated by Republicans at the state level, I was just curious what you think the best path forward is for policy change. Is it local changes at the city and county level, or is it waiting for federal changes?
Great question. Okay, I'm going to hang up on you, but just listen to your TV for the answer. You know the drill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Great question.
Thank you. That is a wonderful question. So we always kind of encourage people to very much participate on the local level because, again, government isn't about waiting for any particular party to make a decision or anything like that. It's about when do people need things and reaching out to their government, the people that they elected for those needs. So as we can recognize, there are definitely needs that are going unmet. So we want people on the local level to reach out to their representatives. You know, a lot of people don't realize that representatives do have district offices, that they don't have to come all the way up here to Nashville to talk to them. They can actually have appointments in their district office. But as far as local power as well, you know, we have seen conversations happen on school boards. We've seen conversations happen in libraries, stuff like that. And we very much want people to participate there because that's where they are going to have the most influence. Now, as far as things like protections and federal protections, it's also great if you have the capacity, which we understand does take more capacity, does take more power altogether, to organize, to have those conversations on the federal level is important as well. Because again, you can wait for them to come down to their district office, but if there's a possibility of a group traveling up together, there's funding usually available for things like that, to have days on the Hill up in DC, stuff like that. It's more about making sure that whoever it is that you're talking to, first off, is the appropriate person for what you're looking for. If you're looking for expanding healthcare access, yes, maybe it'd be nice to talk to city council, but you're probably going to be looking more at state level action. But if you're looking more at creating inclusivity in schools, you're going to be talking to your school board, stuff like that. So making sure that you're talking to the appropriate person, and that also going the legal route or going the legislative route is appropriate as well. It's not always appropriate to go through legislation and go through policy with these things. Sometimes it's just about organizing, creating groups, creating those resources for yourself, for those towns, for those cities, for those districts, stuff like that. But overall, I think that you can create action anywhere. It's just a matter of how many people are going to be at your side and basically what you need.
And sometimes it starts with starting a conversation with just one person,
right,
that may not understand the issue, may not have ever met someone specifically like you, may not just know, right? Have you encountered that?
Oh, absolutely.
Where you see that sometimes those light bulbs go off?
Right, and the thing is, I've been told many times that, you know, I'm the first trans person that a person has met or that they know that they have met. Because sometimes you can know a trans person, you just may not know that they are trans. But I'm the first person that may openly identify and is willing to have those conversations or questions because I also don't have as much concern about the safety because I've put myself in a position with Tennessee Equality Project where I do have a little bit more cushioning in that. So I understand trans people that don't feel as safe having those conversations. So I think it's about the responsibility of both sides to ensure that there is respect on both sides and to ensure that you're both being responsible about the conversation, that you have to remember that there's a human being at the other end of it, no matter which side it goes to. And that's what I always try to ensure in those conversations where people tell me that, as I try and dissolve some of those fears, and I'm like, I'm not going to bite your head off. I promise. Promise we're all good. And we
expect
just talk.
the same of the other person.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's just very good to remember. Taylor, thank you for calling in. We do appreciate it, and we invite anybody to call in tonight, 615-737+. I want to switch our focus a little bit and think about this next legislative session that's happening in Tennessee. It'll kick off in January. What is the Tennessee Equality Project focusing on?
Right, so we are most definitely focused on the now basically shared attack on surgery and surgery access for transgender individuals, and then the potential fight on also hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, which is what trans people use to transition outside of surgery as well. And basically, like those barriers to access, we also do have concerns about the continuation of education and educational freedom, especially as far as having students of all backgrounds in the classroom feeling safe, feeling secure, and being represented as well. There should not be any kind of overstep that prevents a LGBTQ student from feeling safe in their classroom. And last session we saw it, and we do expect to see it again this session.
What specifically do you think will be the limitations proposed in education? Do you have any idea from last session going forward?
I don't particularly know, but I do have the inkling that it has to do more with higher education, diversity and inclusion initiatives, which I know that there was an attempt to restrict some of that last session, as well as the enforcement of parental involvement in certain things that may actually make a child more unsafe than safe, such as purposely outing a child to a parent, or not using certain names or pronouns in school, having to ask that parent first, alongside not allowing for clubs like the Gay Straight Alliance, or GSA, which is now considered a gender sexuality alliance, which is usually just a safe space for people who identify as LGBTQ in schools or questioning about it, to have those safe conversations or just to hang out. And having the legislator intervene with that, as we kind of saw the threat of last year, causes even more issues that we've seen from GLSEN. GLSEN does a climate survey every few years with schools, and we see that schools that don't have GSAs, or schools that don't have safe staff, have more absenteeism, have more issues of mental health, and we overall see the school environment is benefited though by having GSAs, having welcoming staff, things like that.
Is it a protective issue? Is it I mean, everybody, I think in high school, I think back to high school, you just want to belong somewhere.
Yes.
Right? You want to
Yes.
walk into those doors and at least see a few friendly faces, right?
Yes.
I think every kid wants that, needs it, really.
Yes, and it's absolutely a protective issue where, you know, we see maybe a student get rejected by a teacher, purposely outed or bullied by staff, or bullied by the other kids. And in reflection, especially for a kid who's questioning, or maybe has a family member who's LGBTQ, or anything of the matter, honestly, they're going to be reflected of that in their environment. They're going to see that negativity and reflect it back, and it's going to overall cause that school to feel less safe, because they don't have those protections of anti-discrimination policies, or they don't feel as though they can trust their teachers or their fellow peers, stuff like that. So it's honestly better to ensure that safety and protection by welcoming the inclusion, by encouraging staff to be inclusive and to create a safe space for students, because it may be the only one that they actually have.
That's a good point. Let's talk about what I think is probably going to be the #1 issue, because it's already been fired up, and we've mentioned it, is the transgender healthcare issue, surrounding really Matt Walsh put the spotlight on Vanderbilt's transgender clinic, both for on the pediatric side and the adult side, more focused though on the pediatric side. Let's just talk about this issue. Obviously, lawmakers have said they are going to try to stop these surgeries that happen. They perhaps want to stop the hormone therapy that is happening for children. Why is it important that that not happen from the Tennessee Equality Project's perspective?
Right. So for us, we take both the social perspective of, you know, we want to encourage and make every trans person feel safe, no matter how young they are or how old they are, but also, especially as education manager and my background with public health, I do take the scientific perspective as well. And both of them are very complementary of each other, which is that we know that trans healthcare isn't just surgery. We know that oftentimes, especially for youth, it actually is just introducing the conversation to families. Families come in and they aren't sure what being trans means. They don't know where their child got this term from, and they want to know more about it. And they want to understand their child, or at least have a conversation. Even if they're not ready for anything else, it allows the child to have a safe space to process with a professional who is aware and very knowledgeable about the topic. They don't push in any particular direction. We actually follow, throughout the state and throughout the United States, follow the standards of care, which is developed by what's called WPATH, which is a world commission on transgender health. And they meet every few years. It's like, I want to say like 80,000 professionals, and they come up with these standards of care, and they always address first and foremost mental health. And that will always be the primary center of transgender healthcare. But by preventing that entryway of coming into the conversation about HRT or surgery or whatever it is, you're already saying that we don't welcome any of that, right? That we are closing these centers down. Well, that's where they may have the entryway of, I am interested in HRT or I am interested in surgery. Doesn't mean that they will pursue it, but they are interested in it, and it could be that doorway. Now, as far as actually going through and having HRT or hormone replacement therapy, that is a long process within itself. It is not super common, but youth do start as early as 15 because we're looking at past the initial stages of puberty, and we also want to ensure that gender dysphoria didn't just come out of thin air. We do have requirements of mental health evaluations for gender dysphoria, meeting certain kind of qualifications in that, ensuring the patient's safety. Are they engaging in anything else like substance abuse? Do they have depression? Do they have anxiety? Let's take care of those things first before we look at this topic at all. So those things have to be covered before HRT is even welcome to the conversation. And we encourage that because it is a safe process that, again, gets the entire family involved and ensures education of everybody, and make sure that also trans folks, especially trans youth, don't go down the wrong path of trying for black market medication, because that's something that a lot of people aren't considering in this conversation, is that there is a black market for HRT, and that trans youth will go down that path if they don't have correct access. It's kind of the same thing as any other kind of medical care of, if you don't have access to it, you're gonna try and find ways on your own. And that's kind of more our concern, is actually creating safety in those safe pathways so that children don't go, or even adults as well, don't go down that path either. And for surgery, it is, again, also even less common, very much less common, but the only surgeries that are performed on youth whatsoever are at the age of 16, after a year of being on HRT, after multiple mental health evaluations for years, and the only one you can get is what is called top surgery, which is removal of the breast tissue for transmasculine or people who are female, now identify as male. Those individuals can get surgery after extensive record of gender dysphoria, clearance of mental health evaluation, and being on HRT for a year, living as the gender that they identify with.
What do you think is missing from the conversation that's happening right now in the mid-state surrounding this?
I think that one of the big things that's missing is the trans and science voice. I think that it's been absolutely run over, and we're barking out after, and we're trying to speak over loud microphones that have already been shoved in one direction. This is the first time that I've been able to actually say all this. Wow. in person. Like, no one has asked us, has asked the parents who have allowed their children to go on HRT or have gone through a surgery. No one's asking those doctors who are in the clinic, why are you in the clinic? Because they're making assumptions based off of very, very little and very minute so-called evidence, rather than years and years of practice, years and years of science, entire committees, children, families that have all gone through with this. And we know that from other studies that only 2.5% of children who identify as trans ever go back to saying that they are not. So we also know that surgery regret, HRT, is also very small, minuscule part of this conversation. And it's one we should have, but it should not be on the legislative level. It should be in our communities, talking about concerns, having these conversations. Again, respect for respect and responsibility for responsibility.
How will Tennessee Equality Project approach this issue going into January?
Yeah, so our main focus right now is honestly on continuing the education and ensuring that those in Tennessee know what their rights are as far as they can still access healthcare. And that is the one thing that we're really trying to solidify and make them understand, is that you still have access, still go through with it, still do whatever you need to do to take care of you. You still have access, but be aware. And here are some of the resources that you do have for if it goes away. Here's some of the education modules on how to advocate, on how to talk to your representative, and then also educating doctors and representatives as well on what it is to be in trans healthcare as a trans person, why it's so important to have that access and the detrimental effects of not having that access.
If this clinic goes away, if this healthcare goes away for you, what will you do? How will this impact you?
Honestly, I don't know. It's something that you can tell, like, even just
I
by
can
that
tell your
sigh.
blood pressure is up.
It's heavy to think about, because if I'm being honest, you know, I started medical transition when I was 19. I had been rejected for years. I had gone through a lot of depression, anxiety, because I wasn't able to. I had attempted suicide at one point.
I'm so sorry.
And honestly, one of the most life-saving things was having access to mental health providers that understood, that helped me process what my identity meant, if I was experiencing gender dysphoria or not, because that was actually a huge question for me. I genuinely was concerned of that regret. I was concerned of, will I regret this, and really process through that before I went on HRT. Then when I started HRT, I very much early on realized it was the perfect decision for me. My mental health got so much better, and I started excelling because I felt like myself. I felt like when I heard my voice, I heard myself. When I looked in the mirror, I saw myself, because for the first time, I was being reflected and not just trying to make do with what I have, as some folks have told me to try and do. Because I realized that that was what was right for me, and for many people, it is what is right for them as well, to truly be able to live their life.
You are here in the South, and I know that this is particularly a hard place to live in the LGBTQ community. Yet you choose to stay here, right? And you choose to be involved. And that is a big choice for folks right now in the LGBTQ community. I can't say that too quickly.
Tongue tire.
It really is. But it is a choice right now, just because in the southern part of the United States, it's a tough one.
Right. And you know, I've had that question quite a few times, and inside myself and from other trans folks as well, of why are we staying here when there are places that are more welcoming for us. And my immediate response and my gut response is, you know, I was born and raised here. There is no reason why I should have to leave my home because of the weather of the day that politicians have chosen, right? Like, we didn't start this conversation. Not even the people that are joining onto it were the ones to start it. For the most part, they're joining in because they do have concerns about children. They don't know the science, they don't know where it came from. They just heard all of a sudden that all this was happening, and that we have poor trans kids that are being mutilated, or that we have these trans people that are invading children's sports, whatever it is, making us the monster under the bed for political points for the moment, honestly. And that's why I really engage with the idea of the climate of the century and staying here and really investing in your community, because that's where progress is made, is trying to get rid of that noise, because eventually this conversation isn't going to work anymore. Eventually pushing those points isn't going to work anymore, but people will still be here that are working and are working together. And that's a lot more powerful at the end of the day. So I really do encourage those that do feel as if they don't want to leave the state, but may feel pressure from the offices up at the Capitol, stay and engage in your community, really invest, because I promise you have more neighbors than you think you do. We just don't get to hear them as often.
All right, we have to sneak in a quick break, but we will continue this conversation in just a few minutes. Stay with us.